Hi guys, this is the third game we're looking at in the round one from the Africa Super Zonal Chess Championship. This game is between Tennyson and Toritsemuwa. This is still the round one games, so let's dive right into it. Toritsemuwa played the black pieces while Tennyson plays the white pieces. So Tennyson decided to open with c4, which gives rise to the English opening c6, knight to f3, d5. We have pawn to e3, opening up the diagonal to defend the pawn here on c4. Knight came into the game via f6. We have knight to c3, a6 followed, d4. Bishop to f5. We have pawn takes, pawn takes. In this position, there was a lot of time taken to think. Then Tennyson came up with an idea, queen to b3. Why? You see, queen to b3 is ambiguous. It's performing two strong functions. The first and foremost idea you will see here is queen attacking this pawn on b7. If you see the time difference, it was around 22 minutes. Then it thought for around 3 minutes to get to 19 minutes before picking out this move. And at this moment, this move serves as a great move in this position. Well, this move will be very difficult to defend for upcoming chess players, especially the beginners. Let me explain why. You see, this pawn is under attack. There will be an instant urge to bring this bishop to defend. And you'll be breaking a very important rule in the opening. Do not move a piece twice in the opening so you won't lose tempo. So this idea is okay, it's valid. However, you still spend time bringing out that bishop again if you did not find the best defense. Secondly, again, there is an additional motive of queen to b3. The knight attacks the pawn, the queen attacks the pawn. So if you are going to defend with a move like queen coming down here to d7, there can still be some harassment that will cost you some move in this opening and end up still losing one of those pawns. Let me show you an example. You see, if you go ahead to defend with a queen like this, you just give room for an attacking move, knight to e5, attacking the queen so as to kick the queen away from defending either this pawn or this. So we can just simply say, okay, the queen was overloaded. So if you take the queen back, you see, you have given room for this. Queen takes pawn on b7. If you take the queen to this square, defending this, then you gave room to knight takes the pawn here on d5. Although beginners will say, okay, I have this particular move. You don't. That move is not really strong. Let me show you why. Because knight takes comes with check. At the same time, we can see spice up things by even throwing check first. See, check. You know, you can block with the knight. Good. You can block with the bishop. Good. You can also block with the knight here. Good. Let me show you something that can really go wrong here too. This kind of block. This rook is hanging on e8. You see, I'm going very basic because at this kind of elo, this level, most players won't see this kind of continuation. They just fall victim. But because I want you to learn and I want you to understand mistakes in position, that's why I'm showing you these basic variations that can even boost up your games. The rook on a8 is not defended and it's hanging. So with this check, and you instantly play this kind of move, whether in a blitz game or bullet game, you made a mistake because after bishop takes check, some players will do this. Pawn takes, you see, queen can now take this. However, before the queen will take the rook, you just put an in-between move. This is a check also. So either this pawn take or the pawn takes from here, then you can now have this. For this reason, you've messed up pawn structure around the black king. You have made the pieces unorganized. At the same time, you actually get more active positions with your queen compared to the black queen, and so on and so forth. Then if you check material wise, I believe the material are still somewhat on the same page, but you still have organized pawn structure compared to that of black. It's just an understanding of the position. So let's go back to queen to b3. You see, with queen to b3, Toritse found a very good defensive approach with rook to a7, holding on to the pawn. So you can learn this. Instead of bringing back your bishop, wasting tempo, just use a piece that is not working to perform the function so that you can have room to develop other pieces. Here, the game continued after here, knight goes to e5. We have pawn push, bishop, pawn push. This happens. White has castled his king away from the center and is ready to launch attack. So, after bishop to e7, black prepares to castle 2. What did white do? Tennyson went for a beautiful idea, pawn push. The pawn is heading to a5 so as to delay development of this pawn and still furthermore trap the rook in that corner. Toritse castles and we have pawn push. Knight was developed, knight takes knight, queen takes, then bishop enters the game. Knight follows to e4, knight takes, bishop takes, then we have rook occupying the only active open file on this board for now. From this position, we see rook on a to a8, trying to bring the rook back into the game. Pawn push attacks the bishop. What do? This is an immediate threat. So we take the bishop to safety by just going back home to j6. Bishop to b4. Rook comes to the game, countering the active rook. Bishop to c5. Here we have this series of moves. In this position, white now decide, okay, let's take bishop out of the board. Rook exchange happens. We are down with this variation after queen takes the bishop on e7 now, preparing to take this pawn. How do you defend? There's an instant queen to c5. But what happened was Tennyson decided to throw in a check first. Queen to c8 check. King goes into hiding, then queen to c5 now. Seeing how far the king is to support in any form of defense or attack, he chooses now to trade the queens of the board. Toritse gladly offered accepts this offer. Well, there are some responses in this position. Among all includes just queen going back home and staying here for a while, then opening room for the bishop to come and cook up slow defense. However, she chooses to go with queen takes queen right away. Pawn takes. Here we have 3 strong pawns against 2. What to do? The first approach in terms of defense employed by Toritse was a great move, bishop to e8. This idea stopped any form of pawn push and trying to create a pass pawn. Because if this bishop was not there on e8, let's play a random move. For example, let's say this was played, for instance. You see, this is the pass pawn. How? First pawn push, he has to take. So let's go with pawn takes. Second pawn push, pawn takes. Then this pawn becomes unstoppable. That is why Toritse saw this arrangement as quick as possible. He went for bishop to e8. So king to f2 followed. King to g8. After e4, pawn takes on e4, pawn takes on e4. The white king has the dark squares to come into the game and support these particular pawns. See, this is a strategic idea. Since you have more pawns here against 2 pawns, all your focus, if you are the one playing this kind of game, your focus should be towards this side. You have more material. Support these pawns to create a pass pawn. That's exactly what we saw by this demonstration. Well, there are more other strategic ideas played here by Tennyson that we can learn from, and I'll show you. In this position now, as I speak to you, it is black to move. Black has only one move that offers draw, and that is bishop to c6. Why is this offering draw? Now you are attacking a pawn. There are 3 basic responses here. The first one is king move, either to f3 or to e3. That's just for the king move. There is pawn push forward to e5 right away, and there is also bishop move here to c4. Let's address this move and see where it leads to. Let's start with the first one, king move. Now, if king move defending this pawn, the reason why I choose e3 over f3 is because if you have f3, this is a pin already. So the idea like this can cook up and many things can happen. Although you still have bishop coming to d3 to defend. You see, it's still leading to a drawish line. So let me go with king to e3. So we don't have any tactical ideas giving away to black. In this position here, what black will play is just to kick the king. Now, the f1 tree I have to push the king towards this queen side is because the base of my pawn chain is on a dark square and this is a light square. Before this bishop can get to this pawn, I have to push the pawn to a light square. So for now, this connection is safe. This is the only available target for now. So with this arrangement, I'm going to push this king towards any of these squares, trying to prevent any of these pawns from becoming a queen. And that can land me a draw. See, this is now 4 pawns against 2. In fact, let's say 3. Winning is not assured. In fact, the miracle of winning will only happen if one of the players blunders. So we have sorted out one line. Let's come back to this position here. After this move here, let's say from here, we've traded king to a3. Let's talk about pawn push. If you push the pawn, gladly, you know, this position you don't need to capture. Just push, you know. The point is to get the king active, coming closer to that area where the threat is more strong. Okay, let's treat this. Bishop to c4. If bishop to c4 right away, you see the attack is on the pawn. To avoid losing the pawn, we're not going to use this approach now. Keep this approach away and go with this. This way, we are defending the pawn. Then, let's see what white will do. White can still go ahead, probably to push this pawn and activate the king later on to join into this game. That's cool. So let's take it back to how the game was in the position before Toritse played. Actually, in the game, Toritse went for her own conceptual idea with king to f8 immediately. This gives rise to some couple of moves that assured victory. Now, the first move here played by Tennyson that secured him some chances to win was b5. This b5 was not too strong, but it's a different case now that the bishop is on e8, not on c6. You see, in this position here, if the bishop was on c6, the bishop will be able to defend a8 through this diagonal. But now the bishop is here and is slow to get to c6. This is Tennyson's idea with this particular move, b5. Pawn takes in the game, then he pushes e5. What a great idea. You see, he has carefully isolated b7 with the intention to bring bishop to f3, take the pawn, now to push this pawn comfortably. What to do? The pressure start boiling up. This bishop is now slow to come here, because if you try the idea of bishop move right away, bishop to c6, you will only be met with bishop to f3. Bishop takes, pawn takes. Here, if king tries to come to the game, then it's just too slow to catch this pawn after this beautiful move, c6. If you take right away, you see the pawn just moved 2 squares away and the king is too far. If you say, okay, you're not going to capture and you want to just play king, probably king to d8 now, pawn takes pawn. If you near the pawn, it will just be a defense with a6. And there is nothing black can do in this position. Okay, I think we are here. So in this position here, king to e7 comes up, trying to bring the king to this queen side and stop one of these pawns, especially this a pawn. Here, bishop to f3, king to d8, bishop takes the pawn on b7. Okay, we have come to one of the critical position again in this game. What do you think black can still do here, at least to try and secure either a draw or fight for the draw? You see, look at the time on the board. Tennyson is lower on the clock. Toritsemuwa has 6 and it's 6 minutes 18 seconds. That's the time I'm saying. Then 2 minutes 46 seconds. If I'm not saying it well, probably I can be corrected. What do we do here, or what do we say can happen here? So I just paused there. I was looking at this position and I was lost for thought. I said, okay, let me consult our friendly neighbor, the hero of the day, the chess engine. Chess engine gave me a variation which starts with b4. I never thought of this. My mind did not go to this line at all. How is b4 good? Well, check this out. Pawn takes, now a6. This a6 is a threat to promote the pawn in next 2 moves. So the only available piece that can stop the pawn on a6 is the king. So king to c7 comes in. Bishop moves away. King goes into that square. Very important move. King to b8. King moves. King to a7. Bishop defending. Then pawn push. A very strategic movement of this bishop is about to happen, and check it out. Bishop to c4. Bishop moves to d7. Now we have king. Then bishop comes over to c8, using the nearest square to get to this pawn. This is the threat at the moment. Dangerous. King moves. Bishop takes the pawn. Bishop takes. King takes. With the king standing on d5, this pawn has a protector. Closer to this pawn. So what to do? You start pushing your pawn. After pawn push to c6, b3, defending the pawn, we have this. After this move, pawn push, then queen comes in. The reason for a7 was to avoid check on the promotion. So after this promotion, then pawn push comes up. This variation is assuring a form of equality. You see, there are queens on the board and black at the moment, which is Toritsemuwa, has more pawns. So white will try to capture all the pawns, black will try to capture all the pawns, and the checks will be blocked systematically with the queens. With accurate plays from here, this is a drawish line. With bishop takes the pawn on b7, Toritse did not play pawn to b4. Now, she went on with her own conceptual idea, king to c7. We blame nobody because this is as humanly as possible. Going closer to the threat, which is this queen in square, and trying to have access to b8 and a7 is also a very good idea. This is humanly as possible. However, this gave room for Tennyson to execute some endgame ideas, and he did it strategically. He moved the bishop away from the attack of the king. Here, bishop came, king moves, bishop moves back, king moves. After the bishop defends its own pawn and still putting eye on this diagonal, the bishop standing here on a6 did not only just defend the pawn, it's also stopping the pawn from a5, the pawn on a5 from moving forward. You see? Systematically. Here, bishop comes up. King moves, check, king, the king is back. Then we have king going to b4, passing through c3. Pawn takes, king stays on b4, attacks the pawn with the intention to bring in the bishop later on in the game. King to d7, bishop moves. After the king moves, we have pawn push. Pawn push, here there is pawn to a5. Why? Is the pawn to a5 makes this particular pawn here on h6 a back pawn. And secondly, the pawn is now closer to becoming a queen. You see, there is an issue here on the queen side. Once it is resolved, if this king can get to this pawn as fast as possible, then we can also have a threat to promote the pawn. So with this idea, he pushes pawn to h5. Another concept again is to defend the pawn with g4. So the only way to get to this pawn is to mobilize your bishop and hit the pawn. And for now, the bishop is not as free as it should be. If the bishop leaves here, this pawn is going down. That is assurance of victory for white. Here, king to b8, going after the bishop. This gives room for the bishop to come down to c6 because the king leaves and the bishop can now stay there. This pawn is now attacked twice. King now moves to c7. Bishop takes. Bishop did not take the bishop. Well, she's going for this pawn, one. Secondly, she wants to come to f3, attack this pawn. Then the threat would be two pawns marching forward together to become a queen, and she will have the game to herself. Well, Tennyson thought for a while. He saw this and said, okay, what can I do? This was the reason why he pushed c6. Pushing c6, in fact, gave him this game, and I'll tell you why. If bishop had taken, the victory is just straightforward, because after bishop takes bishop, king takes. If you suggest pawn push to a6 instantly, then you might end up having a draw in this game. But the winning move in this position will be king to c4. Why? If e4, king goes to the pawn, then the pawn moves, king takes the pawn. That's the first thing. Secondly, this pawn is on hold. If king goes after the pawn, we'll just simply pick up this pawn, go after this pawn, then take this pawn. You see, we have two strong pawns here as white. Let me show you some cool variations. If king decide not to go for that pawn immediately and go for d5, depriving the king from coming closer to this pawn and having access to h6, we can create a deflection. How? a6. If the king goes after it with c5 or c6, then we just push further, and there we are. a queen is coming in, and this is completely winning for white. After c6, Toritse says, okay, let me use the other approach. Let me not take the pawn right away. Let me still delay the process. So she chose to play bishop to c8. King moves over to c5. And there, from this moment, I just discovered that the game is winning for white. How? It's all over written on the board there. e4 comes up, an idea, but after a6, black resigned. This pawn is untouchable if it gets to this square, and that is completely winning. And giving up the bishop, we just create a notion of slow death, slow pressure, slow suffering for black. So she resigned. Thank you for watching this video. If you've gotten value from this video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share to your friends. I'll bring you more games from the tournament. Thank you for watching.